Hello everyone. Thought I'd go ahead and do my week 3 video a little bit early. So right now it's sitting here Saturday afternoon on a nice warm day outside and I'm in cooling off. So wanted to see, week 3 we're going to be covering 2 chapters, a family module, 2 discussion boards, and also posting on your observation sites. So this is a big week. I'll also send an email out today to make sure everybody listens to this video because it will help you get through this week, which should then after this week calm down a little bit so that it looks a little better. But again, we needed to get some of these, couple of these weeks doubled up so that you can have a little better week as we go through, and also some of the assignments then will not look as tough then, hopefully that way. Kind of a review of last week, or this actually week, but accomplishments, assignments, and suggestions. At the time of the video, we had about 2 students still needing to do Chapter 2, and about 4 still needing to do Chapter 12 quiz. So hopefully by this time Monday, as you all are listening to this, they will have caught up and finished up. I've done a little bit of grading on discussion boards on Chapter 2 and some on Chapter 12. Later on today, I will go ahead, or tomorrow, go ahead and post a few of those with partial points, and hope that later on Sunday night that you will finish those up. Make sure and try to, if you haven't, make sure you read those comments that I do give on your discussion boards especially. I might give you some ideas that you could get some more points as you're going through. Please make sure you're keeping up with the course schedule, and let me know. If you're having a vacation or something conflicts with work, don't hesitate to let me know. I know there's times out there that things happen, and if I don't know about them, I can't give you any suggestions or give you any ideas. So if something comes up, let me know. Let's see here. Wanted to talk a little bit about many of the students that we will be working with have deficits in reading, math, and writing. And if you're going to be teaching those, then you'll be working directly with their goals. But some of you will be working more indirectly. You may be in art or music or ag or shop, or even library or gym, and you're going to still have to work with them. And you may not realize this, but you do have a place in their IEP and with their goals. This can be even more as you enter the classroom. Schools are being required more and more to use inclusion with special education students. Students get more than just academics, though, from being in the regular education classroom. You have to think about the whole student. Socially, the student may get more than you will ever realize, and that may be a big difference down the road for that student in becoming more independent. I saw many good posts about the Supreme Court article. I also had a lot of thoughts from you on inclusion, but I do want to let you realize it is the teacher's responsibility to work with all students. But you will have help. I want you to also know that the special education department has teachers, resources that you can utilize, and going to the IEP meeting is a big part of you learning about all of these things. In my years of education, I don't know how many times I had a regular general education teacher decline to go to the IEP. I even had one PE teacher that stated it wasn't her responsibility to come. Now, I wasn't quite sure how that wasn't her responsibility if it was her student. But anyway, if you aren't at the IEP meeting, then you won't be able to learn about the student, the successes, where they've come. And this is also not the most realistic idea that you wouldn't have an IEP student in your classroom. Many students don't learn the same as you or what your teaching methods are, so you're going to have to learn multiple methods. You're going to have students that are fast learners. You're going to have students that are average learners, some that are slower than others. And some of those will be special education students in all of those categories. And I think sometimes young teachers or teachers-to-be don't realize that. They think of special education students as all of them needing support. But you, in your area, they may not need support. That may be their strength. And there may also be students that struggle more than a student that has special education needs that doesn't have special education needs. They don't meet the criteria to work with special education. So you have to realize that just because they're special education students does not mean, just double checking to make sure that my video is going. The last 2 times I've had to do these twice, but it does look like it's going. So I'll get back to topic here. But basically what you need to know is what are the students' strengths and what are the students' weaknesses. And then you can help them just like any other student. Now I want to talk about the topic of placement. You know, in terms of placement, we're talking about in special education lingo, we're talking about 80 to 100% in the regular education classroom, or 40 to 79%, or less than 40. And it all depends on the student and the people who are gathered at that IEP meeting. So if you are not at the IEP meeting, you're not going to have a say in what your thoughts are about that student that you have in your classroom. They review the information and get to decide the best placement for that student. And I know many of you have concerns and lack of knowledge about teaching in special education. And I hate to say, even after taking this class, you are not going to be experts of teaching those students. But it will give you a snapshot of each of those students that might be in your classroom so that you can go back and have some ideas on that. You know, I've seen some students with mild ID that have had classes in the regular education classroom. They tend to be more time, but do learn well in the regular education setting. You have to realize special education teachers are that. They specialize in special education. They don't specialize in math, in reading, and in writing. So when you have a student in your classroom and you are a writing teacher, you are the expert in that field. So what better way for any student to learn than from the expert in that field? And your first year, you will not know everything. Even in your 20th year, you won't know everything. But you will each year get better and better, especially if you utilize teachers around you, mentors around you to help you with those. Let me think about what was another item I wanted to do. I also saw students post about paraprofessionals. And as a past process coordinator that had to place paras in the best position to help as many students as possible, it's tough. You know, schools have financial resources, but they only have a few. And so we can't have a paraprofessional for every student in every classroom that goes along. So, you know, I want to talk about some things. You know, we looked at what schools needed more help. You know, we would shift paras from building to building, depending on where our schools needed the help. In elementary, it can be easier at times due to the students being in home classrooms and then going to specials like PE, art, and music. There might even be more paras in a self-contained classroom than a regular education or resource environment. And if you're a regular education in 4th through 12th grade, this is going to look even different. You might not have the luxury of having multiple paras. You might have one para and 4 or 5 students that have special education needs. Hopefully, you've had process coordinator or somebody looking and seeing how many paras are really needed, and have kept the student load in your regular ed classroom light enough that that one para and you can manage that classroom. Let's see here. You know, all students need to be challenged, and that doesn't exclude those with special education needs. They need to be challenged just like any other. I know when I was looking through some of your comments, one of the items that flashed back to me is in some of the first years that I was in special education, as I was looking through students' IEPs, you know, I was looking at the scores, and, you know, as we learn a little bit more, you'll learn, you know, what numbers mean. And, you know, when you're looking at IQ scores and academic scores, they have to meet a certain criteria in order to qualify for special education, depending on what category you're looking at. Well, there were some students that I was looking at that by paper, by those scores, they did not qualify for special education. But they were put on an IEP back in the day where it was a choice. School districts had a choice they could make. They could put them in by what they called professional judgment. And as I was looking at a few of these, and I'm not saying all of them, but looking at a few, they had reasonable IQ scores, average IQ scores, close to average academic scores, and back at the time when they were transferred to special education or moved into special education, they were doing similar work as what was the regular education student was doing. And you might ask, well, why were they put in special ed? Well, what it boiled down to, by what it looked on those papers, and again, I was not there when they developed these IEPs years ago for those students, but in some cases, homework. They had trouble doing homework. And so the teachers that gathered at some of those first IEP meetings, and again, these have happened a long time ago now, they thought it was best. They thought giving us extra help in special education would help those students succeed, and thus they would be a better student. But as I looked through that, some of these students had actually gone down in their math scores, down in their writing ability and reading scores, instead of going higher, because, in my opinion, challenging. They were not challenging those students because they're special education students. They're in here because they need assistance. Well, that doesn't mean they can't be challenged. So make sure, guys, if you're in special ed, regular ed, whatever you're doing, challenge all your students. Keep those expectations high. And I tell you what, a few of those students that as I started working with them and I started working with them and challenging them and raising my expectations, some of them in their 2 years, by the time I was done with them in 2 years, they were back in regular education math, back in regular education writing. Why? Because I challenged them, raised my expectations, and you looked at them as a student and worked at them from there. So remember, just because they're special education students does not mean that you need to take your expectations and make them lower. You're not helping the student at all in that case. So I'll get off my soapbox on that one and see if we can go on here. Take for instance, one of the other areas that I wanted to mention here is, I saw some people and some comments were made about, what if the student can't handle the big classroom or can't handle some things. Well, I'm going to give you an instance here. I went to a high school at one point, and there was some students that had autism. And, they didn't handle crowds well and loud noises. So when I came there were a couple students that whenever they had assemblies being done, they would take them back to a classroom instead of letting them participate in the assembly. Why? Well, because they couldn't handle the big noises and the big crowds. So I asked them, I said, what are you going to do when they go to take a job? They're going to be around, depending on what job they go into. They might have a job where there's large crowds. They might have a job that there's loud noises around. What are they going to do? They can't just always not be around. So I talked to the families, talked to the teachers, and we came up with a plan that gradually, from freshman to senior year, we would gradually work them into some of those assemblies. And I had most of those students, by the time they were seniors, they were able to be in the gym with the loud noises and participate just like any other student was. But again, they were trying to help the student, but in reality, they weren't really helping them. They were just keeping them kind of status quo. What they were doing is what they were doing. So anyway, I wanted to tell you that. So let's go on to this week. This week you are going to have plenty on your plate. There's chapter 3 and chapter 9 that we will be doing, plus some discussion boards, plus your post for the observation site. And chapter 3, to me, is one of the most important chapters of this entire book. It is about the family. And I really feel that without family support and family collaboration, your job is going to be very, very difficult. You need the support of family. You need the support of their resources and their knowledge. They have had that student, depending on your grade level, for 8, 10, 12 years. Use what they have already done. Don't just feel that because you're the teacher and you're the expert, which many of these families will feel that you are the expert in education. You're the teacher. But you still need to let them know that you value their opinion, you value their thoughts, and you are listening. Don't be one of those teachers that does not listen to parents. There are many times that I've learned a lot of valuable lessons, a lot of valuable ideas by listening to the parent. So collaboration is one of the biggest things. So read this chapter and take in everything that you can. Listen to the teachers in the chapter and the suggestions that you retain from the discussion board assignment about the chapter on collaborating with parents and families in a cultural, linguistic, diverse society. Then after you finish the quiz, you can move on to Chapter 9, the deafness and hearing loss. This chapter can provide the most discussion on change from you, the student that I see from this book. Many times this is a chapter I see a lot. Read the chapter and pay close attention to the culture. Then look at the PowerPoint, move on to the discussion board, and listen to the story from NPR back on 1012. Make sure you read Deafness, the Dilemma on pages, I believe there's still 330, 331 in your text. Then come back to the discussion board and give your thoughts on deafness. And after you put your thoughts, make sure you put enough information for me to get your perspective and to get points for this part of the assignment. Again, make sure you're watching the rubric. I am really using that rubric. I was a little lenient on the first week, but as we get into these second, third, and fourth weeks, I'm going to be really watching that rubric. So make sure that you're looking at that. And then the big thing here, I want you to listen closely here. You need to respond respectfully to at least one point of view that you disagree with. I constantly am seeing things about how you agree with this and you agree with that. I want you to look at the posts on Chapter 9 and see which ones you disagree with and give some ideas. Give your thoughts on that. Be respectful, but make sure. And after you get done with that post in Chapter 9, then you're finished up with the post. And at that point, you know, some of you are already, I looked on, I think there's one or two that have already taken the quiz for the next chapter already. So many of you are taking heed of my warnings and keeping up with the schedule. Another item I wanted to talk about this week, every week I'll try to touch on a different tech item. This week you're actually going to use it as part of your Chapter 3 discussion board. There is a website called transitioncoalition.org, a great website for learning. A lot of it is about transition from high school to after high school, but there is a great area on families, and that's the one thing you're going to do. It will take some time, about an hour or so, just to get through this module, so make sure that you look and you take some time this week early on to get this module finished up. And then when you post, make sure that you save that PDF certificate on your computer and upload that and attach it to your post. And that way, that will give me, let me know that you have finished the module and are posting about that. So make sure and watch those directions. Let's see. Next week, after this, the third week in week 4, we'll be going over Chapter 4. I'll always try to give you an idea of what's coming up to make sure that if you've got a special occasion coming up, you can remember to keep things going. We have the interview summary that is due the fourth week by June 10th. On that, make sure you are interviewing either a person that has a disability, that was on an IEP in the public education system, or they are a parent of a student that was on or is on an IEP in a public school system. There's been times that I've had students that found somebody that had a disability, but then they did not have an IEP because it did not affect them in the educational setting. They may have had a disability, but if they haven't had an IEP, you're not going to have a chance to really answer some of those questions correctly that are in that interview rubric. So look at that interview rubric. Make sure, if you haven't, that you found somebody that you can interview and get that paper turned in during that 4th week. I do want to say, as I'm starting to finish up this video, that your class is going great as a whole. I still have a class average of about 92%. There are a few kids that still need to get a few things done, but I'm very pleased at those scores and at the comments I've been seeing. So keep up the good work. I'd love for it to stay in that range, that deal. So have a great week. I know we just got done with Memorial Weekend, so some of you may not listen to this until Tuesday. Get into it quick if you're not listening to this until Tuesday, and get that going. And then make sure you're ready for next week. I can't think of anything else at the moment. Make sure, I know what it was I was going to say. The end of next week, which would be May 28th to June 3rd, make sure and post your observation site on the discussion board. I haven't received all of your placement papers. Even if you are employed by a public school, make sure you send that placement paper to me so that I know for sure where you're going and what teachers you are. There are times that students will get observations set up, but then they don't meet the criteria. One of those teachers must be a special education teacher teaching a special education group of students. The other teacher should be a regular education teacher that is teaching students that are all different students. There's regular education students and at least 1 or 2 special education students in that classroom. And by me seeing what the teachers are and what the classes are, I can hopefully catch those things before you do your observations and spend that time and effort and only to find out you did not meet the requirements for what's needed. So if you have any questions, email me. The other item is get those background checks. I still have about 5 or 6 students that we have not received, that I'm not sure that we've received their background checks yet. I brought the paperwork in and checked with Bill Runyon's office on Friday, but they hadn't had a chance to look when I left, so I will go in Tuesday and see. And if there are some kids that are still without their background checks, I will go ahead and email you and see where you're at with that. So, but that is critical. You really should not be going out and doing any observations until you have that background check done. So by the end of the 3rd week, you should have background check done and your observation sites picked and posted so that I know where you're at. I will start nagging students that don't have one or both, just because it is critical here. Most schools only do summer school through the month of June. And if you don't have your background check pretty much started the process by now, it may be mid-June before you get confirmation that your background check has passed. So don't hesitate to give me an email if you have any questions on background checks, school settings, school placement, any of that. I would much rather have those questions now and get them out of the way than all of a sudden the 6th or 7th week, when schools are almost all done with their education, have a couple of students say, I don't have a placement. Then it's going to be pretty tough. I cannot pass anybody in this class if they have not done their observation. So anyway, hope you all had a good Memorial Day weekend, and I will look forward to looking at the rest of your discussion boards on Monday night. Thank you very much.